Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Brian Wirtz. I work with NJDOT, Department of Transportation, in our Division of Local Aid and Economic Development. Thank you for joining us and taking the time out of your day to participate in our webinar today. We're glad that you're excited to go ahead and apply for our latest solicitation for the Transportation Alternatives program. Today, I'm joined by Alan Huff. He's the Program Manager and Safety Initiatives and Public Outreach for our South Jersey Transportation Planning Organization, or SJTPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for Atlantic County, Cape May County, Cumberland County, and Salem counties in the southern portion of New Jersey. And Alan oversees SJTPO's local safety program, bicycle and pedestrian activities, including its South Jersey Trails program, as well as the public outreach, communications, Title VI, and environmental justice, and freight activities. And our speakers today are from the New Jersey Department of Transportation's Safe Routes Resource Center at Rutgers University, whose mission it is to partner with schools and municipalities to prioritize and implement opportunities for people to walk, bike, or travel by other wheeled devices. So at this point, I'll turn over a presentation to Leanne Von Hagen and John Dugan, who are here to give today's presentation, and I'll be back at time throughout the presentation for question and A portions. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Brian, and welcome everybody. My name's Leanne Von Hagen, as Brian said, and I manage the New Jersey Safe Routes Resource Center at Rutgers University. For today's session, we're going to briefly give a brief overview of the federal aid programs and the specifics about the Transportation Alternatives Set Aside 2023 grant program, which is going to include a walk through the grant application that's on Sage. Plus, we'll give you tips and strategies and where to find helpful resources. So John, if you want to go ahead and share your screen. Let me just let you know, this is, we are doing 3 grant application information sessions. This is the second of the 3. If you were here, we did one in June. It is the same presentation. However, the Q&A could go anyway, with your questions and answers. We have one more that we did add to the schedule after the initial announcement went out. We were able to get some new funding to put together one more, which will be held on September 15th at noon. So you can go ahead and sign up for that, or encourage anybody else to sign up for this webinar on September 15th. Some key dates to keep in mind. Solicitation letters went out in May. After today's webinar, you have the chance to sign up for the webinar in September at noon. There are also one-on-one mandatory meetings that you are going to be required. They're mandatory this time. You will need to sign up from. Those mandatory meetings are available to sign up from now until September 30th. The presentation will review in depth these key dates and more to hear. All right. So let me go next. Let me just, back one slide. I just want to go over a few logistics. This webinar is being recorded. So hopefully, if you've called in, if you aren't watching this on the screen, and I hope you all are watching this on the screen, you have called in so that you can hear the webinar. It would be best though if you're looking at the slide presentation on the screen. This presentation and the recording will be available as soon as possible. When we, after we're done today, it's going to take a moment to render. We will put it up on our website, which is at saferoutesnj.org. We also have a YouTube channel that's the partner page that it gets uploaded to. So this should be available as soon as we can get it rendered and put onto our YouTube channel. I hope everybody also knows Zoom well enough to have found the chat button. So in order to move today's meeting along, we would like everyone to use the chat function for questions. And I do know sometimes using chat function can be awkward. You may not feel like you're stating your question perfectly. Please don't feel self-conscious about using chat. We're not here to judge anybody's chat question. All questions are good questions. We just want to make sure we can answer your questions that you're here for today. So feel free to use chat. Don't feel you have to have a perfect question. We can often open it up if there's an issue and we need to get clarification. My colleague John Dugan, who's on, as you see, will be monitoring chat. We do have 2 places in this presentation where we're going to stop for Q&A. So after John Dugan goes through the review of the TA set-aside application, which is a walk through the SAGE application, we'll have our first stop for Q&A, which is about 3/4 through the webinar. The last quarter of the webinar is a little bit more information about the grant application process and some resources, tips, and strategies, and then our final Q&A. So if you don't make it to the first Q&A and you still have questions, there's another one after that. So I really hope everybody's feeling comfortable and feeling good and feeling comfortable with asking questions freely and ready to dive in. So next slide, please, John. Okay, so when reviewing grant opportunities at DOT, they are divided into state-funded programs and federally funded programs. More information about both state and federal grants can be found on DOT's Local Aid Resource Center website at NJDOT Local Aid RC.com. I'll talk more about state funding later. Today, we will focus on the federal funding under the Transportation Alternatives Program. The National Highway Trust Fund is a transportation fund in the United States, which receives money from a federal fuel tax. Every state in the country receives an apportionment of the National Highway Trust Fund. Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside is a set-aside of the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program and provides projects and activities including on and off-road pedestrian and bicycle facilities, infrastructure projects for improving non-driver access to public transportation and enhanced mobility, community improvements such as historic preservation and vegetation management, environmental mitigation related to stormwater and habitat connectivity, trails that serve a transportation purpose, and safe routes to school projects. On a note, something to note, in New Jersey, transportation alternatives and safe routes to school funds are separated into 2 separate grant applications. It's anticipated we will see another grant solicitation for safe routes to school this year in the fall. We'll have to see, but just know that this grant is for transportation alternatives. If you're looking for safe routes to school funding, that will be a separate application. Next. The Transportation Alternatives Program was established in Congress in 2012 under the MAP 21. The FAST Act in 2015 replaced the TAP program with a set-aside of funds under the Surface Transportation Block Program, funded through a proportional set-aside. This has been maintained under the new Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So in 2021, this new law authorized new funding for the TA set-aside program for the next 5 years, which has amounted to $1.38 billion nationally for fiscal year 2022 and increases to $1.49 billion nationally for fiscal year 2025. So be aware this is something that's happening across the country. There's more money that has been added in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Solicitation of applications, project selection, and funding are administered jointly by both DOT and the 3 New Jersey Regional Metropolitan Planning Organizations, also known as MPOs. So 50% of transportation alternative set-aside funds are sub-allocated through Department of Transportation to the 3 MPOs. Here is an important slide that you all might want to take note of. It's a breakdown of the number of applications, requested amount, and number of grants awarded for the past 3 TA set-aside solicitation rounds. For this funding program, we have seen a more than doubled the amount under the new Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So previous round was funded at 9.9 million. The new law provides an additional 15.3 million, bringing the total program funding for FY 2023 to 25.2 million. So that's a good chunk of money available for this round, so keep that in mind. And the most important question we're going to answer first, the deadline for application is November 3rd at 11:59 p.m. There will be no applications accepted past this time and date period. Okay. At this point, I'll give you an overview of the TA set-aside grants. Please, again, use the chat function for any questions, which we will get to shortly. So let me jump right in. What is the purpose of transportation set-aside grants, which we also call TA set-aside? The program awards community-based transportation projects for either land and water that expand travel choice, strengthen public health and the local economy, improve safety and quality of life, and protect the environment. So this is a very specific type of grant. Who is eligible to apply? The majority of applications are from local municipal governments. However, there are many entities eligible to receive TA set-aside funds as amended in the bill, which include regional transportation authority, transit agencies who are responsible for public transportation as determined by the Federal Transit Administration, a natural resource of public land agency, including federal, tribal, state, or local agency responsible for natural resources or public land administration, such as state or local parks or forest agencies, tribal governments, Metropolitan Planning Organizations that serve an urbanized area with a population of 200,000 or fewer. We don't have those in New Jersey, just letting you know that's ineligible. And this other nonprofits partnered with any eligible entity on an eligible project. So on their own, nonprofit organizations are not eligible as direct grant subrecipients for this TA set-aside fund for this solicitation. However, they're ineligible to partner with any entity that is eligible that submits an eligible project. So the DOT will make that final authority to make a determination of the eligibility of an applicant. But many municipalities co-sponsor or partner with their county or regional nonprofits to complete applications, work together on project authorization and implementation, which is important because partnerships can improve a municipality's capacity to manage federal grants. And I'll be talking more about that later. So what's an eligible project? They must be related to surface transportation for land or water. In other words, not solely for recreation purposes. For example, off-road trails are eligible for funding, but should first and foremost be a transportation facility that is multi-use and connects destinations. Transport by water encompasses features like canals, docks, and piers connecting to ferry operations. What distinguishes TA set-aside activities from other worthwhile quality of life and environmental activities is their potential to create a transportation experience beyond the normal expectations. At the same time, they may protect the environment and provide a more aesthetic, pleasant, and improved interface between the transportation system and for the communities and people adjacent to transportation facilities. Another important aspect, proposals must be for a complete, identifiable, and usable facility or activity. Funds are not available for partial projects that cannot function as a complete and usable activity on their own. Okay, the next section are real important. They must meet the criteria for at least one out of the 7 categories, which are as follows. So they fall into one of these 7 categories. First, design and construction of on and off-road trail facilities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized forms of transportation. They are conversion and use of abandoned railroad corridors for trails for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized transportation users. They can be used for construction of scenic turnouts, overlooks, and viewing areas. It can be used for historic preservation and rehabilitation of historic transportation facilities, both land and water, such as building structures and canals. They can be used for community improvement activities, specifically streetscaping and corridor landscaping. It can be used for environmental mitigation to address stormwater management, control, water pollution prevention, or abatement related to highway construction or due to highway runoff. And finally, they can be used to reduce vehicle-caused wildlife mortality or to restore and maintain connectivity among terrestrial or aquatic habitats. So I'm actually going to dive into each one of these samples a little bit to give you a little more information. So first, the design and construction of on-road and off-road trail facilities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized forms of transportation. So eligible activities here include new or reconstructed sidewalks, walkways, or curb ramps, bicycle lane striping, wide paved shoulders, bicycle parking and bus racks, new or reconstructed off-road trails, and bicycle and pedestrian bridges and underpasses. Second is the conversion and use of abandoned railroad corridors for trails for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized transportation users. These eligible activities include designing and constructing multi-use trails along railroad right-of-way, major reconstructions of multi-use trails along railroad right-of-way, developing rail with trail projects. Oops, John, you've gone too far. Go back. Keep back at number 2. Yeah. Developing rail with trail projects, bike parking and bus racks, and purchasing unused rail property for reuse. Okay, so now we can get to number 3. Construction of scenic turnouts, overlooks, and viewing areas. So eligible projects in this category include improvements to protect and enhance existing state or federally designated scenic or historic highways. For more information about designated scenic byways, visit the New Jersey Department of Transportation Historic Roadways website. Okay. Number 4 is historic preservation and rehabilitation of historic transportation facilities, both land and water, such as building structures and canals. Rehabilitation of historic transportation facilities include restoration and reuse of historic buildings with strong links to transportation history, access improvements to historic sites and buildings, restoration of rail depots, bus stations, and lighthouses, rehabilitation of rail trestles, tunnels, bridges, and canals, and interpretive displays at historic sites. Okay. 5th, the community improvement activities, specifically streetscaping and corridor landscaping. These are to enhance the aesthetic and environmental qualities of a transportation facility. Eligible activities include lighting, historic sidewalk paving, benches, planting containers, decorative walls, and walkways. Applications on this category should also include elements of safety and ADA upgrades for pedestrian and bicycle users. Okay, 6th is the environmental mitigation to address stormwater management control, water pollution prevention or abatement related to highway construction or due to highway runoff, vegetation management and invasive species prevention. Environmental mitigation projects to address stormwater management should include landscaping that helps with stormwater management. Green infrastructure is also included as long as it has a transportation facility connection. So these eligible activities include detention and sediment basins, stream channelization, vegetation management, invasive species prevention, and storm drain stenciling and river cleanups. Okay, finally, we get to number 7, reduce vehicle-caused wildlife mortality and to restore and maintain connectivity among terrestrial or aquatic habitats. So these activities include wetlands acquisition and restoration, stream channel stabilization, wildlife underpasses or overpasses, which may include bridge extensions to provide or improve wildlife passage and wildlife habitat connectivity, and monitoring and data collection on habitat fragmentation and vehicle-caused wildlife mortality. So those are the 7 categories. So I wanted to encourage you to keep adding your questions to chat. Thank you for those who've already asked, and we'll go over them shortly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about eligible costs. Project costs eligible for funding include design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction. Applicants are encouraged to utilize local funds to pay for pre-construction activities such as preliminary design, final design, right-of-way, and environmental documentation. However, a design assistance program is also available, which will be explained a little bit later in this presentation, so stay tuned. It's important to note that cost for construction inspection services should be identified separately if those funds are desired as part of this activity. Okay, now the don'ts. Project costs not eligible for funding include administrative costs, miscellaneous contingencies, utility facility relocation costs, and uniform traffic directors unless they're required by design. If any of you are familiar with the previous federal grant, which was called Transportation Enhancements, there were a few activities that used to be eligible for funding, which are now ineligible activities in the federal law. So just if you recall this is from years ago, these are no longer eligible. They include providing pedestrian bicycle education programs, acquisition of scenic or historic easements and sites, providing scenic or historic right-of-way programs, and funding welcome centers and transportation museums. So these are no longer eligible. Another program that is not eligible, that sometimes there's some confusion, is the recreational trails programs. Those are not, anything that's recreation and not transportation related are not eligible under this funding. However, recreational trails applications can be accepted through the Department of Environmental Protection, and that who manages that program. So look that up at the DEP website. Okay, let's talk about project selection criteria. Each application will be reviewed on site by NJDOT staff, and they will also be reviewed by the TA set-aside selection committee. So applications will be evaluated using an established program criteria with a 25-point rating system. Each project will be assessed based solely on the content of the application and the attachments. There are several ways the rating system gives extra points to applicants. You can receive an extra point if the project is located in one or more of the following designated areas. You have a complete streets policy for your municipality, for example. You are a designated transit village, or listed by the Department of Community Affairs as a targeted urban municipality, also known as TUMS, and or opportunity zone. Construction ready projects will also be given higher consideration. And please remember, the location of the project is important. All grant applications will be reviewed for deliberate and actionable considerations of equity in underserved communities. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Actually, I'll tell you about that now. Forgot. The next slide is about equity. So here's what I want to let you know about the equity considerations. Consideration will be given to applicants that provide additional benefits to communities or peoples identified in the following categories. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, environmental justice communities, limited English proficiency populations, and individuals with disabilities. Census data will be used to determine if a project meets this equity criteria, and the following data sets will be used: percent low income, percent minority, less than a high school education, linguistic isolation, individuals under age 5 and individuals under age 18, individuals over age 64, and individuals with disabilities. So as an applicant, you will not be required to show or map this census data or identify these equity areas. What you do need to know is DOT will be doing that mapping and looking at these factors and taking equity considerations in the review process of each proposal. If you have multiple projects you are considering, choose the project located in the section of your town that has the greatest need for equity. Okay, next. All right, you may have noticed I kind of quickly went through designated transit villages, targeted urban municipalities, and opportunity zones. And you maybe thought, oh, how do I know if I'm one of those or all of them? Well, luckily in New Jersey, we have the Department of Community Affairs Community Asset Map. And you can go to this asset map. You can see here, click through, and it has all of these designations. You can choose transit village, half-mile buffer, you can choose targeted urban municipality, you can choose opportunity zones. And then zoom in on this map when you're on the website. And in addition, you can print these maps and you know, so you can include it as you're looking into your application. So all you need to do is go to this DCA website and search for Community Asset Map and start playing with this new mapping tool today. So thank you, DCA. Okay. TA set-aside funds are to be used only for projects with a direct transportation relationship that improve quality of life while reaching the greatest number of people. These are overarching selection criteria for the transportation alternative grants. Applications should identify and show support for at least one of the selection criteria. Questions you should answer in your application include, can you explain how the project affects user choice and mode of transportation? Can you predict usage? Does this project increase active transportation opportunities like walking and bicycling? Does it connect to or bridge the gap with other bicycle or pedestrian facilities? Will safety be improved? Does the project provide regional or community health benefits? Can you explain how it will benefit quality of life, public health, and the environment? Is this project part of a larger state, regional, or municipal transportation land use or economic development plan? If so, make sure you identify, upload documentation, and include the project's connection to whatever bigger pictures in your region. Does the project connect community or regional activity centers and provide economic and/or tourism benefits? How does the project enhance, preserve, or protect historic resources? And importantly, is it urgent because this resource could be lost? In short, this is a very competitive grant. You will need to provide compelling reasons based on the selection criteria why your project should be funded. So at this point, I get to turn this presentation over to my colleague, John Dugan, who's going to walk you through the SAGE grant application. Thanks, John.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Dugan with New Jersey Safe Routes Resource Center here at Rutgers University. Next, I'm going to walk you through the online application. Then we'll take a break for some questions and answers after my walkthrough of the application. As I'm talking, once again, please continue to put your questions in chat so we can make sure that they are answered at the appropriate time. To apply for the TA set-aside grant, applications will need to utilize the SAGE or the System for Administering Grants electronically. Each municipality has access to SAGE. Likely the administrator of the municipality has a username and password, so be sure to check with that person first. Municipalities and counties already have an authorized official registered with access to SAGE from the NJ Department of Community Affairs. If you are a school or school district and don't have access yet to SAGE, contact NJDOT or Local Aid to request access. If you do not have access to SAGE and you are not representing a municipality, you can apply as a new user online through the NJDOT website. Now I'm going to walk you through the application screens on SAGE and kind of get you used to what you're going to be looking at. Once you log into SAGE, you will see the 6 program requirements for the Transportation Set-Aside Grant. These 6 requirements are resolution or letter of support, maintenance commitment, responsible charge, project must relate to surface transportation, project must meet one of the 7 eligible activities, and mandatory one-on-one grant application meetings. I'm going to talk about each of these 6 requirements in detail, and if any of these 6 requirements are not met, unfortunately, the project and the application will be considered ineligible. The first program requirement for TA set-aside is a resolution or letter of support. The resolution must be signed and passed within 1 year prior to the solicitation date, which for this grant is May 24th, 2022. The resolution must refer to the project you are applying for and include either resolution or letter of support from the owner of the public right-of-way that impacts the project. So if the project is on a county road, you'll need to obtain a letter of support from the county. If the project is on a state road, you can contact the Bureau of Safety, Bicycle and Pedestrian Programs at NJDOT at bikeped@dot.nj.gov. Sample resolutions and letters of support can be found on saferoutesnj.org/funding, and I'll also show an example in the next couple of slides. The next requirement needed to apply for the TA set-aside grant is a maintenance commitment which certifies continual ownership and maintenance of the project. If the applicant does not have jurisdiction over the right-of-way, then a signed letter or resolution must be provided from that party. So if one of the roads within your project is a county road, then you will need to submit a letter or resolution certifying continual ownership and maintenance of the project. As is the case with support letters and resolutions, they must be dated and signed within 1 year of the solicitation date of May 24th, 2022. If it's a letter, it must be addressed to the applicant, not to NJDOT. You can also combine both the support and maintenance commitment into one resolution or letter, which is strongly encouraged to save yourself time. Here's a sample letter, which includes both support of the project and maintenance commitment to the project. This sample is embedded within Sage application for ease of use and is also available on our website, which once again is saferoutesnj.org/funding. That's where you can find it. The third requirement for applications to the TA set-aside program is responsible charge. This person must be a full-time employee who will be in charge of the project. The responsible charge cannot be a consultant, even if they provide engineering services or functioning as the local agency of record, engineer of record. The responsible charge is accountable for the project from beginning to end and is expected to maintain familiarity of day-to-day project operations, including project safety issues, direct project staff, or consultants to carry out project administration, and make decisions about change conditions or scope that require change orders or supplemental agreements. The full list of duties and functions of the person of responsible charge can be found in the 2023 TA Set-Aside Handbook. The fourth program requirement is that the project must be related to surface transportation, which includes, as we said before, both on land and by water, so that can include docks, canals, piers, and ferries. The fifth requirement is that the project must be one of the 7 eligible activities that Leanne mentioned earlier in her presentation. You will only be able to select one of the 7 activities. So if any of the following 5 requirements are not included, projects will be considered ineligible. If you choose option number 1, design and construction of on and off-road trails, facilities for pedestrians, bicycles, and other non-motorized transportation users, you will be asked, what group is the facility meant to service, pedestrians and bicyclists, and what is the length of the proposed facility? Indicate the number of miles and be clear about the project limits. As I indicated earlier, you must pick one of the 7 activities. However, if your project meets other activities, choose the one that most accurately fits your project and then include in your narrative portion of the application, which I will show you in a few slides. So for example, if your project is green streets, which addresses both 5 and 6, choose one that fits the goal of the project best. If controlling flooding is the goal, then choose 6, but include in the narrative that it will also improve streetscaping with the installation of trees and plantings. If the project is an off-road trail for bicycles and pedestrians, check that box, but if it will also address stormwater management and reduce vehicle-caused wildlife mortality, include that in the narrative to show breadth of the project. On the slide behind. The last requirement is one-on-one grant application meetings. To apply for TA set-aside funds, applicants must attend a one-on-one pre-application meeting with NJDOT Local Aid. You'll indicate in the application whether or not you have scheduled and attended a one-on-one pre-application meeting and provide the date of the meeting. More details will be given later in the presentation about these mandatory pre-application meetings and how to schedule them, so stay tuned. The next section of the application is to indicate the type of improvement. Again, picking the infrastructure and engineering project that best represents your project. Bikeways includes new bikeways on and off road. Pedestrian safety includes sidewalks, ADA curb ramps, and traffic calming or quality of life, which includes beautification, environmental mitigation, economic development, or historic preservation. Then you'll need to state the title of the project up to 100 characters and choose the county and municipality of the project. The next section of the SAGE application includes providing contact information for the applicant: name, address, zip code, phone, email address, and federal tax ID. Ideally, this contact should be a responsible charge, but sometimes the mayor is the contact or the person from the applicant organization who is championing the project. The next section is the project proposal, where you provide a detailed description or narrative of the project up to 4,500 characters, which includes spaces. This is where you would include if your project meets more than one of the 7 eligible categories. Here is also where you will attach maps, plans, and images of the project. You can use the MapMaker tool to create a map of your project. More information on this tool will be provided later in the presentation. Please be sure to include pictures of the location as well. Continuing onto the project proposal section of the SAGE, you have 1,000 characters to explain how the project supports community or regional benefits and visibility or impact on surrounding locations. Does the project demonstrate the quality of life, community, and environment? Does the project demonstrate the extent to which a project links other transportation modes and increases access to community centers, schools, employment sites, recreation, and shopping? And is it visibility or impact on, surrounding locations? 1,000 characters to explain if the project addresses safety and public health benefits. Does this project provide safety and public health benefits? Does the project address a safety need? Does the project increase active transportation opportunities? And does the project provide other public health benefits? You have 1,000 characters to describe if the project is part of a state, regional, or municipal land use, transportation, bike ped, or economic development plan. If so, have the relevant pages to the plan been attached? You have 1,000 characters to explain if the project is located in a community that has a complete streets policy, is designated as a transit village, targeted urban municipality, or opportunity zone. You have 1,000 characters to explain if the project provides value as an environmental mitigation or enhancement. For example, does it enhance an environmentally sensitive parcel, involve vegetation management, address wildlife management issues, provide stormwater mitigation, or preserve a historic property listed on the National or NJ Registry of Historic Places? Explain if the project will be taking any right-of-way or easements from environmentally sensitive parcels. Once again, you have 1,000 characters, such as from wetlands, parks, historic properties, contaminated sites, etc. Explain if the project requires permits and approvals, such as National Environmental Protection Act compliance, NJDEP, or other regulatory agencies, including Pinelands, Meadowlands, and Highlands. No matching funds are required, but if there are other funds contributing to the project, that shows commitment and potential to exceed. The next section of the SAGE application is the project schedule. Please attach a schedule that shows important milestones, including easement acquisitions, right-of-way permits, utility relocation, bid, start construction, and timelines. Remember to consider NEPA document approvals if this is included in your project, and consider the time and effort required to obtain environmental permitting and allow for these in your project timeline. Indicate the number of months from written authorization to project completion and evaluation. Indicate who will maintain the facility. Does the project require utility relocation? Yes or no? You have 500 characters to explain most of these things coming up. Are permits required? Is the purchase of right-of-way required for construction? Yes or no? Once again, you have 500 characters. Does the project intersect a state highway? If yes, indicate which highway. And if yes, is the intersection signalized? Is there a railroad crossing or highway ramp within the project limits? If yes, please explain. Will the construction impact traffic at a railroad crossing outside of the project limits? Yes or no? The next section of the application is the cost estimate. Identify the phase of work for the project and be sure to check all that apply: design, right-of-way, and/or construction. If construction, attach a detailed cost estimate, including materials cost, tasks needed to complete project, and include full-time construction inspection costs. Full-time construction inspection is required, and construction inspection is an eligible cost. If design, provide design engineering cost, and if right-of-way, provide cost to obtain that. Indicate the total project cost. and indicate the total amount requested. Applicants are encouraged to use their own funds to pay for soft costs, or perhaps there are other sources of funding for the project. It is recommended that projects have a requested funding amount between $150,000 and $1 million. Exceptions may be made at the discretion of the selection committee. Consulting engineers providing design services are not eligible to provide construction inspection services for the same project. Utility facility relocation costs are not eligible for reimbursement. All projects must meet the requirement of the American with Disabilities Act. For projects that involve funding for design, the project sponsor must comply with the federal requirements for the procurement of professional services if the consultants are being used. Not included are administration costs, contingencies, utility relocation, uniform traffic directors unless required by design. An effort should be made to develop estimates as accurately and comprehensively as is practical. To assist with the preparation of the cost estimate, a typical design treatment cost guidance document has been developed and may be found on the NJDOT Local Aid Resource Center website under Training. The partnership and public outreach section will allow you to attach up to 5 letters of support from community organizations, residents, groups, committees, and any other interested parties. Be sure to ask your partners to address their letters of support to the applicant, not the NJDOT. Letters must also be signed and dated within 1 year of the solicitation date, which is May 24th, 2022. At this point, I'd like to stop and address chat questions or other comments that we would like to make sure be heard.
Yeah, so welcome back, Brian and Alan. So there's some chat questions here, and again, you can still add them if you are interested, if there's something that came up. But I'm just going to start at the top. So from Matt Johnson, can an application request funding solely for engineering design of a pedestrian bridge that is part of a regional trail network? Intend to apply for construction funding from another Fed program. So in other words, I know I had said earlier, it must be a complete and usable facility. It can't be a partial. So Alan and Brian, what would you say?
Yeah, my interpretation would be that this probably wouldn't be eligible. I mean, I was reviewing the handbook as the questions were coming in, and all references that I was looking at referred to construction or construction and design, but it looked like construction was always mentioned in there. So Brian, feel free to jump in, but my interpretation would be this would not be eligible.
Yeah, I would second that. So although, we do provide funding for design, that's certainly an option, but solely design would generally not be an eligible option, because along with federal design funds, they're typically tied to a project being constructed, and without having kind of a proof positive that we would know that a project would get to a fully constructed usable facility, would kind of be the disqualifying factor there.
Okay, thanks. All right, so the next one, do the community improvement activities have to be tied to an existing transportation facility? It's a little unclear what that question is, but I'm going to guess the idea of maybe a trail, does it have to be tied to an existing transportation facility or a water feature?
Right. So I was a little unclear in kind of the same way. If we're talking about community improvement activities specifically, though, under that category, projects under that category are meant to enhance the aesthetic and environmental qualities of an existing transportation facility. So for community improvements, the short answer is yes, they should be improving an existing transportation facility.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if the clarifying word here was existing or transportation. An example that came to my mind was we had an application a few years back. Somebody was widening a trail, all good, and then sort of an adjacent segment. They intended to widen the next section in the future, but wanted us to pay for lighting for that section that would be widened in the future. And the lighting was not eligible because that section wasn't, that section wasn't being done. So that was kind of something that came to my mind, is that, existing, that was that, it has to be, for something that's transportation focused and existing. You can't kind of go, off the books and something that's not there yet. So.
Right, correct.
I will add this, and I do get this in a little bit of slide. If you've already built something, you can't apply to pay for what you've already constructed.
Yeah,
So that is,
Yes.
that's another point about existing.
Yeah.
So it has to be, like Alan said, if it's an existing facility and you're making improvements and widening or addressing street crossings and bike parking or something, eligible. But if it's paying for an existing facility that's already constructed, not eligible. Okay. So this one's from Liza. For equity considerations, can the applicant submit results from the NJTPA equity tool? And if you all are interested, there is a really great equity tool. The Northern New Jersey MPO provides, other MPOs have similar tools. I don't know if you want to answer this.
So like John had, I think, mentioned in his section, the equity consideration will be part of the rating process. So the raters reviewing the applications will look into that. But by all means, as the applicant themselves, we certainly would encourage you to submit as much, backup information as you would like to kind of support the full effect of what your project will have, and that would include our equity consideration.
Right, but just know that applicants don't have to do.
Right, not required to, but if you.
It's good to look at these things. I mean,
Absolutely.
The thing of it is you should be looking at these kinds of tools and the data that's out there. One of the points that was made by, I can't remember, John or Leanne, if you are, looking at a couple of different projects in your community, and one of them is in an underserved area and the other is not, go for the one that's in the underserved area, because that's, more likely to be a better scoring project, and certainly has the ability to benefit folks who need it more. So in that vein, you being very well aware of, the equity conditions, in your community is key. What I can say from an MPO perspective is, it's good to have that in there, but don't feel obligated to submit it, because we're going to evaluate the projects on a level playing field. We're going to look at them using the same set of data. We're going to map your projects and look at them together on the same set of data. So, someone who is submitting, their own equity data isn't really getting a leg up, because we're looking at, the same data for everything. Somebody who submits something else isn't going to have those criteria considered where others are not. So,
yeah, good point. Excellent. Okay. What's the difference between an on or off-road trail versus a recreational trail?
Right.
So the recreational piece is, on or off-road trail versus recreation. It's not necessarily a one versus the other. On or off-road trail can still be eligible, but the recreational piece is the key. And it's kind of a sniff test a little bit. You have to look at it, and a reasonable person be able to ask the question, does this serve a transportation purpose beyond just recreation? A really easy one is if you are building a trail loop inside a park. That is a very clear example of a facility that is only for recreational purposes. Most things aren't quite so stark and so black and white, but the gist of it is, as reviewers, we have to be able to look at it and say, okay, this is clearly serving a transportation purpose. People could use this facility to get from point A to point B, use this to make trips to the grocery store or to work, or they can replace a vehicle trip with this facility, or it be part of a facility that they could use to replace those trips. So that's the best distinction I think I can offer.
Right. No, I think that's a good one.
Yeah,
Also,
well said.
yeah, if you happen to know it will make transit connections, that's another good thing to point out, because clearly you could take transit to the trail. There's actually a whole website. If you haven't been to NJ Transit's Transit to Trail website, there's another resource for you to add it to show the transit connections. Okay, great. How is highway runoff defined as part of criteria 6? What kind of road does the runoff have to come from?
Sure. So I don't know that we would get so maybe as far into the weeds as saying, you know, what exactly is the level of the facility, like primary, you know, there are major arterial versus local collector, you know, that sort of distinction. But it should be, and it kind of be on the applicant to kind of provide justification that the runoff is clearly being caused by a transportation facility that supports motorized forms of transportation. So, you know, a road, a street would just be, it's the piece there that's most important is that the runoff is clearly a result of whatever that transportation facility is.
Yeah, the only thing beyond that I would offer is, you know, be aware of who owns the road.
Yes.
If you're dealing with runoff from a county route and you're a municipality, you know, make sure that you're coordinating with the county, make sure that you have the support of the county. You'll need resolutions, you know, all of that stuff before you, you know, propose a project within county right of way to address their runoff issues, and they're not on board. That's the only thing beyond that I could offer.
Okay.
Same with state, but you know.
Yeah.
All right. And Lisa asks, if the community needs major repair and reconstruction of sidewalks, would they need to be continuous sections?
So not explicitly, but we do have to keep, you know, it's important to know that this program is not intended as a maintenance program. So we gotta be careful where we're towing that line in terms of, you know, enhancing pedestrian facilities versus fixing broken sidewalk sections here, and here.
Yeah, and you know, regarding continuous, you know, there's a couple of pieces to that. I mean, if you have one section that's in really bad condition and then a next section that's fine, you wouldn't want to replace the section that's fine just to address the section that's bad.
Right.
And I guess the other interpretation of continuous is, as a reviewer, I greatly prefer not to see an application where you're improving a poor section of sidewalk and then not addressing a missing section of sidewalk. That might sound like a ludicrous statement to throw out there, but you know, we have to say it because those things happen. So, you know, I will say though, filling in gaps is a very high priority piece, you know, for this program. If you have, you know, gaps in your network, you know, especially in areas, you know, like underserved communities where those facilities are necessary, that is a strong project. So, you know, make sure that, you know, when you're thinking about the competitiveness of your project, you know, really look closely at the ability to fill in those gaps.
I will only add on that, and when it comes to sidewalks in particular, and it's in the tips and strategies, so listen for this, will be said twice. Don't just look at the sidewalks without also addressing street crossings. There is a safety element here that the department and the MPOs really want to see. And sidewalks do provide safety, but you really are most at risk as a pedestrian or a cyclist in the crosswalk. So make sure you're addressing anything like traffic calming, crosswalk improvements to make them more visible, speed reduction elements, signalization if needed. So, we know one thing that we know in the state is a lot of times we'll have a beautiful trail facility, but then people really feel uncomfortable crossing mid-block to get to the other side of, any type of, smaller street, county road, state road, whatever. The state and the counties, they want that safety element to be included, so that if you're looking at trail crossings, sidewalk crossings, any of that, that you definitely include that. Okay, so the next question from Joe is asking, which category would Morris Canal Greenway projects fall under? Morris Canal Greenway, if you're not familiar, it's in my area, so I'm real familiar. Thanks, Joe. Mostly they're probably the first bicycle and pedestrian, but because they're not really abandoned right of way for railroad. So I don't know that there's that much distinction to make. Is there, Alan or Brian?
I guess this may be a little bit of a non-answer, but I would say to look at the 7 eligible categories and to pick the best that suits the improvements that are intended by the project. Category number 1, construction of on and off-road trail facilities sounds to me like it would be applicable, but by all means, like John had mentioned, if there's more than one category that you feel the project would fall under, do be sure to elaborate in your application as to what those other categories may be.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not necessarily going to have one category that taps out. Like, it's not like there's not a competitive advantage to picking a lesser known category. They're really looking for the best project. If they all happen to fall in category 1, that's what the selection team will use. If it does spread out more evenly between the 7 categories, that's just because they got good applications, because they had to fulfill somebody getting category 7, somebody getting category 3. That's not the process.
Yeah, no extra points for any category over another.
Yeah,
they will all be rated equally.
And I would say, if your interpretation is it's a 2 and our interpretation is it's a 1, it's really no big deal.
As long as it's one of them
is that it's eligible for the program. That's key. Make sure it's eligible, and it should be obvious that it's eligible. We were talking about this before the session started, but when you're looking at your project, the more obvious it is that your project is eligible, probably the more competitive it is. So less concerning which box you check in the 7, but make sure it's definitely eligible.
Okay, and we got a question, a responsible charge question always comes up. So so the question is, does it matter what the department or the title of the responsible charge was designated from the municipality? So does it matter who is designated the responsible charge?
So the big requirement here, responsible charge title could be whatever they'd like their title to be, but you do need to be a full-time employee of the agency that's applying. So full-time employee of the LPA of the applicant. So we have chief of police that are responsible charges sometimes. We have clerks that are responsible charges sometimes. It does not need to be an engineer necessarily. Even, we have clerks, borough administrators.
What it can't be is if you have an on-call engineer that your municipality brings in like a consultant, they are not eligible.
Yeah, whether they're full-time or part-time, it makes no difference.
Right.
Need to be, yes, correct.
If you're using your engineer, they have to be a municipal employed engineer, not a consultant.
Right. Employed by the.
Okay. Can you clarify the letters must be within 1 year of solicitation date? This is another kind of confusion. We get it a lot. We understand it. It is a little confusing, but it's just a nuance. They must be from 1 year before the date or the date to the present. All right, you want to take that, Brian?
Yeah, sure. So the solicitation letters went out a few months ago.
May 24th.
May 24th. So in order for a letter to be eligible, they cannot be any older than May 24th, 2021. So
Yeah,
they can only be within 1 year. This is not to say that they can be submitted a year later. They do need to be submitted at time of the application being submitted, but they can be up to a year old.
What may happen is, we know as grant writers, you may find pieces of application you can kind of recycle into this one, and there's not, as long as you're meeting the eligibility requirements, that's not a problem. So if you already collected letters of support for, say, a trail facility sometime before, since May 24th, 2021, and you don't want to have to go back to that nonprofit organization and ask them for a new letter, you can use that letter of support for the trail facility. But it really should be the trail facility and the section of the trail facility that you're putting forth in your application. So it's easier really to just go ahead and get new letters. But if you happen to have something that was a letter of support, you can have a slightly backdated letter of support. But however, most towns, most applicants, they get those letters of support today. They get right after this webinar, they're sending out their request to community support groups, advocates, people who would be using the facility, and asking them for letters of support for your application. That's really the best way to do it, and not worry about how old the letter is.
Right. And yeah, and I think we'll get into it in the maybe later in the presentation as well, but same goes for resolutions. They have to be within that 1 year time frame.
Okay, so what further information would the selection committee need to request funding for more than $1 million limit? When would this request need to be made?
Let me jump in on that one. I thought I overheard during the presentation an incorrect reference to the cost range. So there was a reference during the presentation to the projects needing to be between 150,000 and 1 million. That's old from the previous solicitation. So for this program, this solicitation, we're not accepting projects under 350,000, and solicitations can go up to 1.5 million. This is not a soft cap. This is a hard cap. So it's 350,000 to 1.5 million. And you don't need to do anything special to qualify for 1.5 as opposed to 500,000. That's just the range.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm going to make you'll hear it like probably another 3 times before the end of the session today at your one-on-one meetings. Talking through the cost and the budget is a really important part of that meeting. So bring your wish list of costs and talk it through at your one-on-one mandatory meetings, because they can help guide you on what to put in your application and what maybe should be a phase 2. And the costs are there costs for design and construction? I'm going to go into that a little bit in the last quarter of this presentation. The encouragement is to go ahead and use, some municipal funds or other funds if you have them for design and those costs. However, there is a design construction part of the application, part of the program, which I'll be explaining in a few minutes. So if you want to maybe hold on to that question and then bring it up again if I still don't answer everything you need by the end of the presentation. Okay. I'm just going to put in chat. I meant to mention this earlier. It usually comes up, but slides from today's presentation are already on our Safe Routes Resource Center website. We have a grants and funding tab. In that tab, you scroll to additional TA set aside grants and resources. And there's a link in chat if you'd like to look at the slides and some of the other resources we've already talked about in this presentation, like a sample resolution and those kind of documents, and the cost estimator that's in there too. Okay, on that note, we do have another Q&A, so feel free to keep adding questions to chat, but at this point we'll finish up the presentation and then stop for our last Q&A. So John, if you would move forward. Okay, great. So for this next section, I'm going to talk about the grant application process. And I just want to start with a look at the bigger picture. There are 5 stages to any federal grant process. Currently, we consider this presentation, as part of the pre-award stage, where the Department of Transportation is soliciting grant applications. Following this stage are the awards notification stage. Those who are selected and who are awarded contracts will then set up kickoff meetings with the Department of Transportation. After that, after the award stage is the authorization stage. After DOT and FHWA review all the final documents, you will receive written authorization to proceed and be able to spend funds. This is a really important distinction. You cannot get reimbursed for funds before you receive written authorization, or stage 3. After that is the implementation stage, where you perform grant requirements, submit reports, and request and receive payments. And finally, the closeout stage, which finalizes the contract after all aspects of the project are complete. So this may seem like a simple 5-step process, but I want you to be aware completion of all 5 stages will take several years. Projects must receive authorization, like I said, or stage 3, within 2 years of notification of project selection. This includes demonstration that you have necessary permits, approvals, and environmental clearances, which will be obtained within that time period. Some things, next slide, some things to keep in mind as you consider applying for these funds. First, completing the authorization process, or stage 3, is necessary prior to fund distribution. Any money spent prior to receiving the official go-ahead from the Federal Highway Administration will not be reimbursed. Second, funds are provided on a reimbursement basis. This means you will need to spend money upfront and present invoices for the money spent before you are reimbursed. Be sure to budget accordingly. Finally, all applicable federal laws and regulations must be followed. Make sure you have the capacity to manage federal funds. And I just want to say we are very, very lucky in New Jersey, because by federal law, typically in other states, this grant requires a 20% match. However, in New Jersey, the Department of Transportation covers that 20% match with state funds. Thus, no additional match will be required from the applicant. I don't know how many states are unique, but New Jersey's pretty unique in that. Okay, next. One opportunity with TA set aside is the design assistant program. So here's your question being answered. This will be available to all TA set aside grant recipients. The Design Assistance Program makes available consultant engineering services to assist with the development of plans, specifications, and estimates for projects. DOT will establish a pool of engineering design consultants through a quality-based selection process. This purpose of this pre-qualified consultant pool is to aid in the delivery of the project process by reducing the time required to procure professional services and ensure the consultant selection process is compliant with federal requirements. Use of this consultant pool for design assistance is not mandatory, but encouraged in order to shorten design time, reduce costs, and improve quality of the delivery. Just know there are several steps to selecting a consultant and negotiating services on the part of the Design Assistant Program process. If you choose to use design assistant services, New Jersey DOT will hold a specific meeting to discuss the pool of consultants and the full process with you. So this is something that comes after project selection and those who are awarded the grant. Okay, we mentioned this before, but like I said, we're mentioning it again. New for this round of TA set-aside grant applications is a mandatory one-on-one pre-application meeting with each applicant. Applicants must attend and consultants are welcome to join the meeting. In conjunction with the New Jersey's 3 MPOs, DVRPC, SJTPO, and NJTPA, the Division of Local Aid is offering pre-application meetings to prospective applicants where you can discuss your project concept and get guidance on whether the proposed project is a good fit for the program. The team will be able to help identify any potential risks and discuss essential program requirements. Participation does not guarantee a grant, but it helps the department ensure that projects submitted are funds are good and will be good applications. All right, so keep these dates in mind. Pre-application meetings opened in April and they will close on September 30th. If you go to NJDOT localaidrc.com, you can click on the slider. It's the first one to show up to sign up for your pre-application meetings, and do so ASAP so that you can make sure you get your mandatory meeting in before the closing date in September. Okay. Here's a few things to prepare for your one-on-one meeting with local aid. You can create a project map. And if you don't have one, on the website is a map maker tool. Create a brief description of your project and to the best you can, a cost estimate of your project. And as John mentioned, on the localaidrc.com website, under training is a typical cost for design treatment document to assist you with your cost estimate. There's also a pre-application questionnaire on the New Jersey DOT Local Aid Resource Center website. Just know that you don't have to have every question perfectly answered in that questionnaire. Just come prepared to talk and discuss that questionnaire. It really does kind of act as a outline for your meeting. Okay, I'd like to finish up with some tips and strategies. And again, please add your questions to chat because we'll be getting to our second Q&A time shortly. So first and foremost, make sure you review all NJDOT grant application guidance materials. And there are a number of resources, again, at the NJDOT localaidrc.com website. Pay close attention to the content in the TA set-aside handbook. Listen, dog ear, highlight, and make this handbook your friend. All of what we presented here today is in this handbook and more. So make sure you download the 2023 version and take a look at it and start using that as the backup for starting your application. Make sure you include all of the 6 requirements. Okay, a few reminders for resolutions. Don't upload a blank resolution that is not signed and dated. Unsigned letters of support or resolutions will not be accepted. And unfortunately, this is a fairly common mistake. Make sure you work early to get resolutions from all parties. So maybe you need a resolution from your town council and a school board and the county. If all of those are needed for your project, make sure you are working starting right now to get those resolutions in. They do take time. Use the sample resolution, which has the maintenance commitment that's available both on our website, and it's also downloadable when you open the SAGE application. The resolution of support, you want to make sure it refers to the project for which the funds are being sought and make sure it's been passed, recently. Again, we said this before, but make sure the letters of support are addressed to the applicant and not to DOT. Also, please identify your person of responsible charge early. We already had a responsible charge question about who that can be. Just know that this person of responsible charge, it's a very wonky term. It is a federal requirement. This is not something we've made up. This comes from the federal law. The responsible charge does not need to be an engineer, but they must be a full-time employee of the local public agency, otherwise known as the applicant. Consultant engineers providing engineering services or functioning as the local agency engineer of record are not eligible to serve as the responsible charge. NJDOT understands that not all municipalities have a full-time employee. So if this is a concern, please reach out to DOT Local Aid to discuss other options like co-sponsors and partnerships. Again, this would be why you need to set up your one-on-one pre-application meeting ASAP. If you don't have a full-time person of responsible charge, that is something to bring to your application meeting. So schedule those meetings today. Okay, next. Next slide. Here's some more important tips. So again, be thorough. I mentioned it before, but the ratings are based on the application content. Don't assume raters know the project, your town, the location, anything about, statewide or regional networks. just assume they don't know it. Write it as if you're telling a friend who's never heard about your project before, because the application really must stand on its own. They're not going to use outside knowledge per se to say, oh, they meant to say that this project would extend to XYZ town. No, you really need to make sure that it's a thorough application. DOT staff will field check all project locations to make sure and to double check your application. This is it's a really interesting thing. They're just going to come out and go field check the application. Not every reviewer will be on that field check. So make sure, again, you're keeping your application thorough. So for those reviewers who aren't doing the field check can understand where the project is. But that also really means, because they're going out and field checking, make sure your map and project description provides clear project limits. So when they do go out into the field, they're not going to call you up and say, hey, I'm going out, meet me. They're going to just do a whole bunch in a row, and they need to know they don't want to get lost in the process. Make sure you've included, this is where the start point is, this is where the end point is. Provide streets, provide any landmarks to help demarcate those locations. Indicate your construction readiness. Whoops, go back a slide. Include status of permits, right-of-ways, and utility relocations. Project funding amounts requested, and this is something we mistakenly said a little bit earlier, but this is the slide to pay attention to. The request amount should be no fewer than $350,000 and with a limit of 1.5 million. Include all costs of the project, including construction inspection, and indicate any additional funding sources. Ensure costs are current and comprehensive, and use this cost estimate guide that's provided for you. An effort should be made to develop estimates as accurately and comprehensively as is practical. So, download this cost estimator and use it to your advantage. Okay, next slide. Include a map that provides context, connections, and attractions. You can use the free map maker tool to draw your project. That can be found on the NJDOT Local Aid RC website. This map would be what you would want to bring for your mandatory one-on-one meetings. Provide the project location within the larger area. Provide project limits for new construction. Add attractions like people will like to walk and bike to for food, entertainment, historic landmark, transit, all of those. Include those on your map. They don't have to be computer generated. You can highlight a paper map and scan it. You can also take screenshots in Google Maps. So just make sure it's clear and comprehensive. Okay. One of the best things you can do is include good pictures of your proposed project. In the application, you can include up to 10 photos. However, I've seen some applications where multiple photos are part of one PDF document that provides description, need, and context to the project. In other words, use photos to tell your project story. When taking photos, make sure they adequately show the issues. If you have a safety concern, make sure you capture those concerns in your photos. If your concern is seniors crossing the street on Saturday mornings, take the pictures then. A photo of an empty street that doesn't fully capture the safety issue is not as helpful to reviewers. Also, don't include photos that are too close up and provide no real context. Use people or feet or other ways to provide scale in your pictures. And remember, not all the application reviewers will be part of the fieldwork process. So give them the context they need to properly assess your project. Okay, next. Lastly, a few don'ts to add to your list. These are mistakes that applicants made in the past, so please don't make these mistakes. Don't submit a completed or partially completed project. Don't propose a project on a county road without consulting the county. Don't propose something that goes against current design standards. Projects must comply with all ADA standards. Don't propose a sidewalk without accompanying safe streets crossings. And I'll add that for trails too. If you're proposing a trail and you're crossing a street, make sure you include the best design standards for your street crossings. And don't propose a project in a neighborhood where residents have actively protested against it. Projects that can show community support will receive higher ratings. And think about costs. This should be for bigger projects. really don't apply for any federal grant if it's under $350,000, which is the minimum they want for these grants, because these are really for bigger, more regional, larger projects. Okay, guess what? We're almost to the finish line. So I'll give you some more important resources for next steps. Many of you are familiar with DOT state-funded programs. The Transportation Trust Fund provides over $400 million in state aid to municipalities and counties for local transportation improvements. Each fiscal year, the New Jersey Department of Transportation issues a solicitation announcement to municipalities inviting them to apply for funding for their specific project needs. Applications receive points based on various criteria, including existing conditions, safety improvements, and access to public services. Other important criteria include the municipality's special designation, whether the municipality has received an allotment within the last 3 years. And extra points are given to towns with a complete streets policy or listed by the Department of Community Affairs as a targeted urban municipality. I mentioned the state funds for if you find that you actually have a smaller project or are doing, like was mentioned earlier, maybe you realize some of the maintenance, sidewalk maintenance you may be interested in may not really qualify you for a TA set aside. Try looking at the state funds. That might be the more appropriate grant source. You don't want to be working on a federal grant if you actually are better off with a state grant. They did just announce that the solicitations were open. They were due July 1st for this year, but they do tend to come in the June-July time period. So if you didn't get an application in for municipal aid or other state aid programs, it's not too early to start those applications for the 2024 grant round, which should be announced sometime spring next year. Okay, there is another option. This is called the New Jersey Transportation Infrastructure Bank. It's an independent state financing authority responsible for providing and administering low interest rate loans to qualified municipalities, counties, and regional authorities for the purpose of financing transportation quality infrastructure projects. So currently, to the end of July, the construction loan interest rate is 1.4%. Yeah, that's a little higher than it's been in the past. But you can, if you want to explore this option further, you can make an appointment with Infrastructure Bank staff to discuss your project by visiting njib.gov/njtib. Okay. There are many recent resources that can help guide municipalities on policy and design that address walking and bicycling, including several guides that are specific to New Jersey. For example, the New Jersey Department of Transportation's Complete Streets Design Guide, the Complete and Green Streets Model Policy and Guide, excuse me, the School Zone Design Guide, the School Bike Parking Guide, which is also a good parking guide for municipalities outside of school zones, are all newly released and available on DOT's website. Using these design guides will show your commitment to safety and show that your project is looking to do more than just some road striping and a few signs. Consider designs that will make a real impact for safety of people walking and bicycling. The key is all environmental engineering plans and specifications shall conform to engineering standards and must be prepared by a professional engineer licensed to practice in New Jersey. Okay. Another great resource is FHWA's Proven Safety Countermeasures, which are evidence-based treatments and strategies that practitioners can implement to safely address crashes and to achieve safety goals. One approach whose aim is to eliminate fatal and serious injuries for all road users and is the primary method for realizing Vision Zero and the safe system approach. Where traditional road safety strives to modify human behavior and prevent all crashes, the safe system approach refocuses transportation systems design and operations on anticipating human mistakes and lessening the impact forces to reduce crash severity and to save lives. The safe system approach addresses the safety of all road users, including those who walk, bike, drive, ride transit, and travel by other modes. NJDOT includes a number of resources from FHWA in this updated 2023 TA Set Aside Grant Handbook. So go to the handbook if you're looking for all the resource links here. Finally, other resources and technical assistance you should take advantage of to help you with your grant application. We've mentioned it several times, the DOT Local Aid Resource Center was established to assist each community with project planning, grant applications, project delivery, and guidance through the federal process. This is always a good place to start for all NJDOT grant information, and they have a help desk for questions. You can also find many of these resources, or all of these resources, on the NJDOT Local Aid and Economic Development website, including the access to SAGE to start your application. NJDOT's Division of Local Aid and Economic Development is divided into 4 districts plus staff at the DOT headquarters main office. Your district representative will manage grants selected to receive TA set-aside funding. Please note, if you're in just District 2, that phone number recently changed, so please take note if you're looking to reach out to District 2. Okay, because 50% of TA set-aside funding is sub-allocated to the 3 MPOs like SJTPO, who Alan Huff is here from today. They can also help you with your community with addressing regional transportation needs. So check out your local MPOs websites for plans and other resources to help you with your application. One of the best resources, and one of my favorite resources, is free technical assistance provided by our 8 regional transportation management associations that do cover all 21 counties in the state. Staff within these associations are available to help with several walking and bicycling initiatives, including Safe Routes to School programs and assistance on adopting complete and green streets policies. Okay, this is the other one near and dear to me because this is one I manage, the New Jersey Safe Routes Resource Center, which is housed at Rutgers University and supported by the Department of Transportation. We are here to assist public officials and professionals and the general public in creating a safer and more accessible walking and bicycling environment in your community. Feel free to reach out to our help desk through our website for questions or assistance with making your community safer and healthier for people for walking and bicycling. There's also training programs, free training programs offered through the Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation, which is also known as CATE, also offered at Rutgers University. CATE offers webinars that are certified for continuing education credits for several professional organizations. And there are several courses about managing federal funds that I highly, highly recommend. If you haven't taken them, please sign up. They're free. So including in their resources and webinars includes grant management for federal aid projects, federal aid responsible charge training. They have a crash analysis tool training that is coming up in next month, and more training that you might find as an engineer or even as a DPW director, or even some police may be very interested in taking. So I suggest signing up and taking their website. On the federal side, there is a Federal Aid Essentials for Local Public Agencies website. It offers a central online library for informational videos and resources that address complex regulations and requirements of the federal aid highway programs. And they do put them in easy to understand concepts and illustrated examples. So it's another website to search if you have some questions. Okay, I did speed through that a little bit, but I wanted to get to Q&A again. And I hope you all are ready with your questions. I see we have one more question, I think, is since our last questions. Or no, actually, I don't see any questions. I guess we did answer that.
There is one in the Q&A.
Okay. Oh, I see. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to Alan and Brian. Can a municipality apply for streetscape improvements on a state highway? That's a really good question.
You're muted, Brian. And I'm happy to punt that to Brian.
Yes, I am muted. Now I'm not muted. There we go. So it is not explicitly disallowed. However, it would be important to note if you're dealing with improvements along a state highway, you're dealing with the state highway right of way. So we'll have to be sure to, during the administration of the project or in getting to the construction of the project, we will have to deal with right-of-way section as well as access. And there would be permits necessary to, if you're kind of disturbing state right-of-way. So not a flat out no, but there will be additional challenges for projects that may be located on state highway or adjacent to state-owned right-of-way.
And my 2 cents to add on top of it is if you haven't already started coordinating with the state by now, if this isn't a process you've already kind of been working down and you don't already have a contact and conversations are already happening, I would move on for this solicitation. And that's not to disagree with anything Brian suggested about is it or isn't it, but I would assume that process would need more time than you probably have at this point.
Yeah, and I will add in the chat, if you are interested in talking about any project on a state highway, in the chat, I put the Bureau of Safety Bicycle and Pedestrian Programs.
Yep.
That is their general email address. Email them today to set up a meeting to chat about what you're interested in, and they can also guide you through next steps.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I like, Rupert, good question. Is there a contact number or email for any of you for any further questions after this webinar? And yes, so John, can you advance to the next slide? Yeah, let me just, before I get to the contacts, just a reminder, we had these 2 webinar dates. This recording is going to be posted as soon as we can, hopefully before the weekend, if not Monday latest, once it's rendered and we can get it up on our YouTube channel. The webinar from June 7th is already posted on our website and on the YouTube channel. I can give you a link to that. And if you want to come back, you're welcome to come back from the September 15th or share it with your fellow folks who are working on an application if they want to hear this webinar as well and ask further questions. So, keep that in mind. Just so you know, the September 15th will also be part of what we're hosting is a Safe Routes Academy. So every Thursday in September, we're going to be having sessions from 12 to 1:30 on how to make your community more walk and bike friendly as part of the Safe Routes to School program. So next slide. Just a quick reminder about meeting dates. Your next step is to get your one-on-one mandatory meeting scheduled if you haven't already, and that the deadline is November 3rd, 2022. No applications will be accepted after November 3rd. So make sure you don't miss the timing on that. And finally, our last slide has the contact information that Rupert asked for. Oh, next slide, John. There we go. So we encourage your questions about specific grant questions. Go to the Local Aid Resource Center. If you have questions about design guidance, especially around walkable and bikeable communities, you can reach out to us at the Safe Routes Resource Center. So the distinction is if it's a grant application question and you really need to get something more specific, reach out directly to the Local Aid Resource Center. Walking, biking, trails, those kind of questions can come to us at the Safe Routes Resource Center. Okay, so I hope that helped. I can put those contacts in chat as well. Okay. Les has a question. Is there likely to be a 2024 round of TA applications?
So I would say, we'll take this one solicitation at a time, but for now we are focused on the 2023 round. Historically, TA set aside has been, solicitations have been on kind of every other year, kind of a 2-year cycle. So, but if there's going to be any kind of changes to that, for sure, notification will go out for whenever the next solicitation ends up being.
I will add this. We run a newsletter through the Safe Routes Resource Center. You can sign up directly, and our newsletter will always have grant information in it. For this one and beyond, we try and collect any grant announcements that we're aware of. We try to get them out in our newsletter. I will put a registration link in chat in case you want to join our newsletter. And then Lisa asks, when is the announcement of awards?
Right. So again, right now we're in of course, the solicitation phase of the process here. Once all the applications are submitted by the November 3rd deadline, there's time in the schedule in terms of rating the projects, right? Having the selection committee meetings and having the final projects that are selected all approved. So we're going to have to kind of punt that question for when the announcements come out. But you'll be the first to know if your application is receiving an allotment for sure.
It's a really common question, and I will back up DOT from what I've witnessed over the years. Sometimes it's out of, Local Aid Resource Center does a really good job and thorough job of application reviews. But there is it is a state agency. There's a hierarchy of reviews. They do go up the ladder all the way to the governor's office before they're announced. Then they go to each MPO, and each MPO, like Allen's, has their own board of directors, and they review and approve and vote. Is it vote, or how is it? How do you?
Yeah, they vote and there's a resolution to approve it and all that.
Right. So there's a lot of steps to the approval before grants are fully announced. So keep that in mind when you're putting together your schedule and your timeline for this grant. Getting the award announcements will take a little while, and then usually takes a good 2 years to authorization after awards are announced. So plan accordingly. This isn't something, don't make promises in your town that if you receive the award, you'll get the construction done right away. There's a lot to this process. It's a larger grant amount. It's a federal grant. There's a lot of check boxes to T's to cross, I's to dot before you really see implementation. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, and we are a little bit over time, but if anybody does have any questions, please reach out. We look forward to hearing from you, but we look even more forward to seeing good applications in and getting some great resources for the state constructed.
That's right. And don't forget to schedule your one-on-one.
That's right. Schedule your one-on-one today.
Very important. And at that point, you'll have lots of contacts. You'll have all sorts of contacts. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And good luck on your applications. And so we'll hopefully see some good applications starting, on November 3rd.